How fast do you think innovation is occurring? Are like the new products of today really 10x better than the ones of the past? Like, are people innovating that much faster, like on a year over year basis too? Because we have existing companies that are also trying to push the edge, right? Some of the companies you've backed, maybe at series A or B level, like every year they're trying to get better and better and better. I feel like, like you have Moore's law talking about how like the cost of memory is going to reduce by half every year or whatever the case may be. Like, is innovation expanding at that level where it's like each year's version is like it's getting that much better? Because on sometimes I think it's not, but then I look back, like when we look at a hardware level, if I look back to a computer 5 years ago, like it's unbelievable how slow it is compared to what a computer is today. Is software innovation, do you see it moving that fast, or is it more marketing hype, or because there's a lot of companies claiming to have breakthroughs?
Well, look, I mean, even whatever it was 20 years ago, if you were starting one of the first generation SaaS companies, you still had to buy the equipment,
Yeah.
and set it up and like host it like in your garage or whatever. So now not only is that compute readily available, but all the tools and services that you need as a developer engineer to just get up and running. And in fact, today's developers, they're barely writing code. I mean, I had one of our summer interns actually told me a funny thing. He's like, I studied computer science at like a top university, but I don't think I could actually write code to build an application, because all I do is look up, what are the components I need to just assemble that application online, and then, that's the application. But that's how software development is done today.
Yeah.
It's aggregating components that have already been pre-built, that are battle tested, and open source is a huge component of that. And that just enables innovation to happen at such a faster rate, because the barriers to entry to actually starting something have been lowered drastically. And at the same time, you've got incumbents that were built more in this world of client server, and where they were kind of, everything was a big monolith in terms of the architecture. And that's a very disruptible premise to go against when you're a next gen company starting from scratch without sort of the burden of the tech debt to work against you. And so I truly do believe there is a much faster pace of innovation happening today, owing in part to these kinds of development tools and just sort of the methodology of developing software and SaaS software that has enabled it to come faster. And I would also say there are certain ecosystems that have really cultivated this in an effective way. So we've been very active in kind of companies built on top of Force.com, for example. And it's a great way to jumpstart not just the engineering and application building from an innovation perspective, but also the commercialization of it. And so this is not meant to be a commercial for Salesforce in terms of my response here, but even as a venture capital, that's a capitalist, that's an attractive value proposition in terms of the speed to market and speed of innovation.
Oh, I agree with that part 100%. I mean, so my personal foray into that was not for Salesforce, but it was for Shopify. I built an app for Shopify. I mean, it was never meant to be a huge company, but it generated revenue. It was like 5 days. Like it went from like, spent 5 days making it, and I was plugging and selling subs right out the gate. I was like, I couldn't believe it. Like, this is awesome. The thing that you just mentioned, software supply, I just started thinking about software supply chain because you mentioned it earlier in the conversation as well. And we had interviewed one of the co-founders of Sonatype, and they were talking about how like
they coined the phrase, by the way. I didn't invent it. That was all Sonatype.
Yeah. They're the ones that came and said, like, dude, software today is no one's actually coding anything. They're just kind of like Legos. Like, oh, I want a OAuth. Oh, I want image recognition, or I'm going to go use this service to do some data tables. And they're putting it together. And when one piece fails, they were talking about how, because software is cobbled together, kind of like the way you described, is sometimes companies don't recognize and they can't spot their vulnerabilities because they're not sure, or they don't realize that the component part that they've put in, or maybe a developer like 2 years ago put in, has been compromised, and they like don't even know it's in their code.
Yeah, absolutely true. And it's how everyone's building applications today. And so that's why you get these kinds of critical vulnerabilities like Log4j that come out, and they require a tremendous amount of cleanup work. The other thing is just getting ahead of what are those new vulnerabilities before the bad guys start abusing them, those so-called 0 days. We have a really cool company called Recorded Future that it's a great example. I mean, when we invested in the company as a minority venture investor and ultimately became a majority shareholder in the company throughout the course of the life cycle of our investment, it's a really great story in terms of partnering with the founding team who's still leading the company today, but through just a transformational evolution in terms of the company's scale. But at the same time, that scale has enabled them to track and identify threats in a way, and cybersecurity threats in a way that no other company has been able to in the past. And so it's just been one of those sort of self-reinforcing, the more data you have, the better you are at kind of understanding new patterns that are emerging out there in the wild. And, they're scanning everything from open web to dark web, deep dark web, and doing it in a machine-oriented way. So the dragnet is totally automated. And that's, created a really interesting sort of response on the part of folks that need to be proactive about, do I have, exposure to these kinds of 0 days that I may not have known about beforehand.
Hey, thanks for watching. This segment is brought to us by Salesforce Platform. Visit salesforce.com/newsletter to discover timely insights and useful tips tailored to your role. Subscribe to this channel and get more great IT and tech interviews with top industry leaders.